sircha, there's a hole, that's a vadai. It's not a suffix. So you only have one suffix. You have a suffix of whether the adhesion came from the wall or whether it came from the lung. So he argues on Rav Nachman. Good question. You can see the next line of the Gemara. It gives us what to do. So Heichi Abdina, what do you do if you're choshed? What do you do if you're concerned? So Amar Rava, Rav and Bar Shaba Asper Ali. So he explained to me, Maisin Sakina Dechalish Pume. So we take a very sharp knife, Umarfarkinan La, and we cut off the lung from the wall, right? But we want a very sharp knife. You don't want to be blunt because you don't want to impair the lung, because if there's a hole, then you're out of luck. So we want to keep it clean to be able to examine if there really is a hole. If there's a defect in the chest wall, right? So if you see bruises there, even if you don't see for sure a hole, but you just see some degenerative activities on the chest, you're good. You get the right at that point to assume that the hole is in the chest and not the lung. The ilo mechmas riyahu. However, if you don't see an issue with the wall of the chest, then you have to assume that it's from the lung, utrefa, and then in which case it's a trefa. And then then some people say some people keep this next line in v'alfagav the loka mafkazika, and even if you would then run the test, it would still be a trefa. And some people actually take this line out and say it's a trefa, but if you would run the test, it would be okay. Meaning it's machlokas and whether how strict we are with this once we assess that it's not in the chest. Do you get the right to do more research, or you have to assume at that point it's a treifa?
This is the case that the lung is attached to the wall.
This is the case where the lung is attached to the wall. Exactly. Okay. So on this idea of that, we said that if it's attached to the chest and there's no abrasions of any sort, that it would be kosher initially. Rav Nechemia Breid Rav Yosef Badikla Bifashure. He said even if our original case that if the lung is attached to the chest, but there's no blisters on the lung. There's no blisters on the lung itself. Rav Nachman told us that it's fine. It's considered kosher. So Rav Nechemia was strict. He would basically, even though there was no blisters on the lung, since it was attached to the wall, Rav Nachman says it's okay. He says no, even though Rav Nachman says it's okay, he would still take it and do a test. He would put it in warm water and assess whether it showed a hole or not. Right? Because in our test, we blow it up, put it in the water, and see if it bubbles. Okay.
Is that pretty separated? Otherwise, how do you put it in the tent?
After you separate it. So it's no longer attached to the wall. You took a very sharp knife.
On the wall and it still has a problem with it?
This is where you did not see. First opinion, Rav Nachman says if there's no bruises on the lung, you don't have to start investigate. Right? You could just say it's kosher. It's only if there's bruises, then you have to investigate. Rav Avimi argues on him. So according to Rav Avimi, either case he was machmer, and according to Rav Nachman, it was only in the case where there was no blisters he was machmer, because even he would agree if there's blisters, there's potentially a problem. Okay. Amrle Mar Zutra Bread de Rav Huna Bread de Rav Popular Ravina. Had Rav Nechemia Bread de Rav Yosef Asunaha Masnila. This test that he would do afterwards, which he didn't necessarily have to do, he was doing it to be machmer. Anan adrava masna. We actually have an understanding that no, this test he was doing wasn't referring to this case of blisters on a lung. Rather, it was the case of Rava. What was the case of Rava? Amar Rava, hani tarte une deria desirchen ladadi. Right, this is from the bottom of Mem Vav Amud Beis. Where there are two unin that are connected to each other, right? Rava was talking about where the two unin are connected to each other and they're not right next to each other, right? Remember, remember our picture of the lung. You got on the left side you have two unin, on the right side you have three unin, and then you have the big umas underneath each one, depending on which way you're looking at it. So Rava had taught us that if they're connected, if there's a sircha between the unin themselves, these little lobes, then there's a problem if they're not adjacent to each other, right? If they're next to each other, it's normal. But if they're not, then we say that the adhesion that's connecting both of them is probably going to break, and it's indicative of a hole. So last lubadika lachshu, right? Rabbi says you can't, examine it to make it kosher. And Rav Nechemia Breid Rav Yosef Badik La Bifshure, and his teaching is a kula. He says no, even if you have two unas that are not next to each other, and there is a sircha. Rav had told us that's treif. So according to this teaching of Rav Nechemia, he says it's not necessarily treif. It means you have to do more work, and you can basically run a test, put it in water, and see if there's an actual hole or not, and then it could potentially be kosher. So our first teaching of Rav Nechemia is teaching him as saying a chumrah on our Gemara, and now we're saying no, it's not really a chumrah on our Gemara, it's a kula on this Gemara of Rava from 2 days ago. Okay, so now this understanding that he's talking about a kula on the case of Rava, where you have two of these little lobes in the lung stuck to each other, he's saying maybe it's not for sure treif, maybe you can run this test and see there's really no hole there. So Maskas Ravashi. Ravashi challenged that he's talking about the case of Rava. Why? Hi Mai, what's the case? I understand the case of our Gemara where it's connected to the wall, why he wants to run the test. Because if the adhesion, if there's no hole in the lung, then there's a hole in the chest. And a hole in the chest is not a problem. There's only an issue with a hole in the lung. What would be accomplished, right? In the case of where if it's a piece of the lung versus a piece of the lung, if you run the test and you see no hole, what did you accomplish? By definition, we know that a sircha creates a hole, so you're not really accomplishing anything. We're understanding at this point of the Gemara that a sircha is a vadai, indicative of a hole. So meaning it made sense to run a test when you can say that the hole's somewhere else in the chest. If you're going to say that the hole is either lung A or lung B, what difference does it make if you run a test? We know that any hole in a lung is a problem. So we throw out that second opinion of Rav Nechemia. We say Rav Nechemia really must be going on our Gemara. Okay, so we said to start our Gemara so far that Rav Nachman held that if there was a sircha between the chest and the lung, an adhesion, right? If they were connected, it's okay. But if there was blisters, it would be a problem. So Umi Amar Rav Nachman, Hachi, does Rav Nachman really say this? V'hamar Rav Yosef bar Manyumi Amar Rav Nachman Ria shenikva v'dofen sosasma kshera. We have a teaching that Rav Nachman says that if there's a hole in the lung and the chest is on top of it covering the hole, it's kosher. So what does it matter? Rav Nachman taught us that if there's blisters, it's a problem. What do you mean? Assume there's blisters, assume there's a hole in the lung, and then the chest is covering it. We have a teaching that Rav Nachman holds, if the wall of the chest is covering the hole, that's okay. So, ma baya. So lo kasha. So it means Rav Nachman versus Rav Nachman. But it's not a contradiction. Why? Hasam b'makam revisa. This is where did Rav Nachman say it's not a problem for the chest to cover the hole? It's where the chest and the hole grow close together, where the chest and the lung grow close together. However, where it doesn't work, where it is a problem, where if there's blisters, we have to say, oh, it could potentially be from the lung. That's where it's distant from the wall. And what is where it grows close together? It's where the little sections of the unis, right? So going back to our diagram, if you want, you can look a few pages back in the article, but we have like we said at the beginning of this year, the 3 little lobes and the 2 little lobes next to it, and then underneath they have the umos, the big lobes. So we're saying the 3 little lobes, they go deeper into the cavern, right? Because they're closer to the top of the head, so it gets narrower towards the top of the rib cage. So those 3 pieces are much closer to the wall. So if there's an adhesion, it's very strong because it's very close together. However, if it's near the bottom part where it's a wider range from the wall, the adhesion will not be as strong because it's a longer distance.
So you mean the wall would be a
cover
for for the lung
Yes.
because they're attached to each other. So it will be a part of the lung situation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what we're saying is basically that if the lung is connected to the wall and there was a hole underneath the lung,
Right.
it's okay
It covers
because it's
it.
covered by the wall.
Right.
I mean, normally we say, just to review, we said a few days ago that if there's a scab, if there was a lung, it had a hole, and then it grew a scab, that's not kosher because we assume that the scab will eventually fall off. But this is a different type of covering because now it's sharing a wall with the chest, and we're saying that's stronger than that. But we have a teaching from Rav Nachman on the one hand saying that's not strong enough, and we have another teaching from Rav Nachman saying it is strong enough. So it depends how close the wall is when it will be strong enough to act as a permanent seal for the lung. So Gufa, this itself, which we just quoted, Amar Rav Yosef Bar Ben Yuni, Amar Rav Nachman. This teaching of Rav Nachman. Riya shenikva v'dofen sotamta kashera. If the lung was punctured and the wall covers it and it's kosher, right? We just said we have a teaching of Rav Nachman where there is a scenario that's kosher, where it's very close. So Amar Ravina v'hu disvich bevisra. So Ravina says that's where it's enmeshed, where it's intertwined with the basar. What's he adding? He's adding 2 points, potentially, minimally 1 point. He's for sure adding that it's not good enough if it's right next to the rib cage. Where if it's covered by the bone, that doesn't work. It has to be covered by this membrane of the wall itself to really seal it properly. Yeah, the meat itself, the flesh. And some people also hold that he's saying that the nature of the seal, it has to have a lot of sinews going back and forth, sealing it very good. But he's basically just qualifying it. He's saying where Rav Nachman said that the chest is a good seal, it has to be really sealed into the flesh itself. It's not enough to just go into the bone, and it's not enough for it to be in the flesh in a weak manner. It has to, in there very much. So Amrle Rav Yosef Ravina, V'ilo savech my treifa. So you're implying that if it would not be completely enmeshed into the flesh, it would be a treifa. Alma amrina nekuvihi. So we see that it would be considered a full-fledged hole if it wasn't fully enmeshed in the wall. Ihachi, if that's really true, ki svich nami. So then even if you're telling me that there's degrees of how enmeshed it has to be, then even if it really gets enmeshed, why does it matter? Why? Because it's still a hole. Meaning now he's saying you're making distinctions between how tight it is to the wall of the chest. What does it matter? If there's a hole, there's a hole. So why does it matter? Why is he so confident that if there's a hole, even if it's covered very properly, that's not kosher? Because of this next brisa, it creates a problem. The next brisa we're going to learn about, we know there's a law in the Torah that a person who has a messed up male organ, he is not able to marry a regular Bas Yisrael because he can't procreate. There's an isser. It's a straight pasuk in the Torah that a person with a messed up member can't marry into the congregation. So we qualify that in this brisa. Dahadatanya, nikav psul mepnei shehu shotes. If a person has a hole in the member where if he would shoot out his semen, it wouldn't go directly out the normal spot. It would also dribble out the top or the bottom. That's a problem. Nistam kasher mepnei shehu moled. However, if you cover up the hole, if flesh grows in and gets fixed, it's okay because then he's able to sire children. This is the main point. This is the problem that the Gemara has. V'zehu psul shechozer lechshero. And this specific case of the male member being covered up and then is the case where something is returning to its level of kashrus. V'zehu lemute mai. So meaning the Gemara is picking up on the fact that the brisa says v'zehu psul shechozer lechshero. It's implying that only this case, if there is a seal to an unkosher hole, can it then be kosher again? But normally, a seal to an unkosher hole won't be kosher again. So meaning in our case of where we have a hole in the lung, and then it gets sealed with the membrane from the wall, it sounds like this brisa is excluding that case. That's what the Gemara is trying to say. V'zelumute mai. What's this brisa coming to exclude? Lav lemute ki hagav is not coming to exclude our case, meaning only in the case where a person's organ regrows to cover the hole, does it become kosher? But normally, like a case of treifa, where the lung has a hole and then it grows from the membrane of the wall, it's not kosher. Lo, limuti krum sha'ala mechmas makabria de'eno krum. No, what's that coming to exclude in the case of the Bryce? It's coming to exclude a normal case of a scab. Like we said earlier, if there's a hole in the lung and there's not a wall coming to adhere to it on top of it, and it's really just that the lung heals itself and creates a scab, that's not kosher. And that's what this Bryce is alluding to, is that traditional case. However, the case where the wall of the chest cavity itself is enmeshing with the hole in the lung, that's a good cover. So we tried to basically bring a kasha on this idea, and we said it's not really kasha. So he also is going to try to bring a kasha. Ilu inkav bedofen lahada mai treifa. We're saying, so if the chest got a hole and the chest was coming to seal the hole in the lung, it should be a treifa, right? Because the only reason it's not a treifa, the hole in the lung, is because you have a chest that's intact covering it. So if that chest would then have a hole, shouldn't that be a treifa? It should be, right? It is a treifa. So listening nikua hadofen. So our Mishnah is a kasha against this because our Mishnah listed 18 treifas and it didn't list this case. So you're telling me that if the wall covers the hole in the lung, that's a good covering and it's kosher. But if that's really true, how come when our Mishnah listed its 18 treifas, it didn't list this case of a hole in the chest that's covering a hole in the lung? That's the Gemara's question. But according to your reasoning, Hada Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mara Shenikva V'Kaved Sotamta Kashera. If the gallbladder had a hole and then the liver came and covered it on top of it, Ilu Inkvi Kaved Lahada My Treifa. If the liver then became punctured, it got a hole in it, opposite the hole it's covering in the gallbladder. So listening to Kuva Sakavad. So let the Mishnah say this case of having a hole in the liver of the liver that's on top of a hole in the gallbladder. Ella ki nikvas dalav mine mitarfe lo katani. Hachanami kevin dalav mine mitarfe lo katani. Meaning the same way it didn't list that case, it didn't list this case. Meaning the Mishnah was getting into specific cases of a treifa in a specific location. It wasn't talking about these derivative cases where it's only a treifa by virtue of a fix which is coming on top of the original treifa. It's obviously endless, these scenarios. Meaning the fact that there's 18 treifas and then there's scenarios where these 18 treifas come alive, the author wasn't taking pains to write all those cases. It was only taking pains to write cases where there was a localized hole. Okay. Okay, so we Rav Nachman had basically created a distinction between a sircha, an adhesion that had holes in the where there was holes in the lung and where there wasn't holes in the lung. So now we're going to go on a little bit of a path of understanding of what is the rule in general of these bruises or blisters that are on lungs. Ba'amine Rabbi Bar Chana Mishmuel. Halsa tzmach mahu. What is the law of a blister in general on a lung? We were talking about if there's an adhesion. What if there's no adhesion? What if there's just a blister? Amar le kshera. So Shmuel said it's kosher. Amar le af ani omer came. I say it's kosher. Elasha talmidam mizdaznim bedavar. However, but students are unsure in this matter. To Amar Rav Nasna malya mugla treifa. Because why were the students unsure? Because Rav Nasna said that if it's filled with pus, then this blister, then it's a treifa. However, mayim zakim kshera. However, if it's filled with clear liquid, it's kosher. So Amar le. So Shmuel said to him, Hahi bekule itmar. No, that's not talking about a blister on the lung. That's talking about a blister on the kidney. So therefore, he really holds it's kosher. Rabbi Yitzchak. So at this point, he holds that a blister on the lung is kosher. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef Hava Kazal Basrei to Rabbi Yirmiyah Beshuka Detavche. Rabbi Yitzchak was walking behind Rabbi Yirmiyah in the meat market. Chaznahu lahanach the kaiman simche tzamche. He saw that the lungs were very full with blisters. So Amrle So he said to him, trying to understand what his opinion was on this matter, Lo boy mar umtza, does the master want to buy some meat? Meaning he wanted to see if he would hold this is kosher. So Amar le Leslie prite, I don't have any money. He's avoiding giving a hard answer. So Amar le Akvanana, I'm gonna extend my credit for you. I'm gonna guarantee your purchases. Don't worry, you can buy the meat. Amar le Ma'av dechal. What do you want me to say to you? Dechi also l'kamei de Rabbi Yochanan. I have a hard time answering this matter. Why? Because when this case came in front of Rabbi Yochanan, mishader lehu l'kamei de Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. He would send these questions of blistered lungs to Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon. Demori ba mishmei de Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon l'hatera, who would real leniently in these matters. So. The lelo sphere, but I didn't hold of it. Meaning, what do you want me to tell you? I actually think blisters are a problem. I think that really a blister is indicative of a hole, which would be a treifa. But people don't hold like me, so I didn't want to answer this question. Right, it's very nice. So just I heard on this. So Rav Elfan pointed out that this is this kind of gives rabbis coverage. Meaning, has a rabbi, if you come ask him a shaila, how does he have the right to basically tell you to go somewhere else if he thinks the answer is different? So you see from this Gemara, you have the right, maybe even it's proper to basically, if most people say the halacha is one thing, and you have a das yachid on something, you don't necessarily have to tell someone he has to follow your understanding. You could say, go ask other people and follow this lenient opinion if that's what the masses are doing.
Is that right?
Right. So it's humility. Right.
So the reason he wasn't getting the meat or buying the meat was because he had doubts about it?
He had doubts. He wasn't sure it's really kosher, but he said that he understood that people held it was kosher. So his friend who was asking him, he didn't want to say, oh, it's unkosher to you, because he understood that many people hold it is kosher.
But as a rabbi, wasn't that his responsibility to say that?
So that's.
Oh, this is the treifa and.
So I guess the person he had asked, maybe he felt was either a greater rabbi, or maybe it was very common practice in those times that people were utilizing this leniency.
It's basically machmir, and don't be machmir on the tzibur.
Right.
Machmir al atzmo.
Machmir. Right. Or maybe it's related to what we said. And maybe it's related to what we said at the beginning of the shir. Maybe it has an understanding of how you understand blisters. Maybe we were saying about sircha. Maybe a blister. Maybe saying it's a suffix.
Yeah.
It's a suffix whether it creates a hole.
Either way, he should have announced it for the public.
Well, it's hard. You don't want to trumpet something that you don't fully support, even though everyone holds of it.
I know, but he's as guilty as the rest of the people who eat it.
Oh, because you're saying he should say it's not kosher.
No,
Yeah,
if
it's not.
So for me, it's not.
So is he saying maybe he's not sure it's not kosher? He's just not sure. He's machmir. It's coming out of doubt. Yeah.
Very, very machmir in this thing. Say, if you want to be machmir al atzmo. Be careful to go out and say it in the shiur even.
But don't be machmir on others.
No, because if you're not sure.
Right. So you're saying what is he saying, Baruch? He's saying it's coming from the fact that he wasn't 100% positive, so he didn't want to just put his chumras on everyone else if he wasn't sure. If he was positive, maybe he would have been more vocal about it. Okay. Kihava misaginin basre de Rav Nachman b'shuka. When I would I'm a Rav said when I would walk behind Rav Nachman b'shuka digoldai in the marketplace of the leather workers. And some say in the shuk of the rabbis. What's the rabbi's shuk? As Rav Elfan said, this refers to a Sfarim store, where they go to buy Sfarim. Chazi Hanach Tekaima Kande. Right, the Sfarim store. So he would see these blistered lungs that were very large. These are very large blisters. V'lo amar lahu v'lo midei, but he didn't answer the merchants from selling these lungs. He didn't say that these are treifa. So Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi habu chalfe b'shuka de Tiveria, and similarly when Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi would walk in the shuks of Tiveria, chazi hanach tekaime tinrei, they saw these lungs that were also very large. Rashi says they were very hard. They were also hardened. V'lo amri lahu v'lo midei means it's a more significant case. It's blisters that are only large. They're also very hardened. There's better odds of it being a hold. But they didn't say anything at all. So meaning you're seeing all these different cases where people did not answer blistered lungs. Okay, Itmar. New concept, but related concept. Malchat shenimtza beria. The case of a needle that was found in the lung of an animal that that you just performed shechita on, and the lung was intact. So how did you know there was a needle in the lung if you didn't take it apart yet? So Rav Elfin says either it was protruding out a little bit, or they had reason, or they heard something messing around there. They had reason to, or there was a bruising of some sort. They had reason to know there was a needle inside. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Zev Reichman machshir, right? So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar say it's kosher. For Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, for Rabbi Mani, for Patish, for Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim, Tarfe. They say no, it's treifa. Right, so what's the issue of why a needle in a lung should be treifa kosher? Leima b'hakamifli. So what are they arguing about? The Mar savar chesaron b'fnim shmei chesaron. Mar holds that an internal, we saw this idea yesterday, now we're going to say it a little bit differently. He holds that a chesaron, that a hole from the inside is considered a true deficiency. Umar savar lo shmei chesaron. And Mar holds, no, a hole inside is not considered a true deficiency. Lo, this can't be the machlokas. Why can't this machlokas? Because the kuli alma chesaron b'fnim lo shmei chesaron. Everyone holds a hole on the inside but doesn't protrude all the way to the outside is not considered a true chesaron.
No problem.
So what's the hacha b'makamifli? So what's the machlokas? Mar saver simpona nakat v'asai. Mar holds that it came through the windpipe. Umar saver nakui nikvei v'asai. And Mar holds it came through the food pipe. So what's this machlokas? The basically, if it comes through the windpipe, so it didn't actually have to puncture anything, right? It's weird. Most animals aren't going to be eating through their windpipe. They eat through their food. They eat through the esophagus, the food pipe. But if it came through the windpipe, it didn't actually puncture anything. It could have came in smoothly, going directly from the windpipe directly into the lung. Ultimately, the windpipe feeds the lungs. However, if it got from the food pipe, which is the more normal way for the animal to eat, then it must have pierced through the stomach. It must have pierced into the lung. It must have pierced directly into the lung, in which case it's a hole. So basically, pick your poison in a sense. Meaning he's saying, look, bottom line is the needle is in the windpipe, so it is in the lung, so it must have came through the windpipe, and there's no hole. And he's saying, no, the fact that it's in the lung, it's because an animal normally eats through its mouth, in which case the fact that you don't see a hole isn't a problem. It must have pierced and you're just not seeing it.
So how the needle got inside the lung? I don't understand that.
It came through the esophagus and then it pierced through. It pierced through and it created a hole.
That lung
swallowed
the air, so not the food pipe. It's connected
into the lungs.
Air.
Yes, you're right. Yes, that's why. So it's more intuitive to you that even though normally a needle wouldn't come in through the windpipe, but because it's in the lungs, it must have came through the windpipe. So they're saying no. He ate it. He accidentally ate it, and then it bled through into the lungs.
Okay, but it didn't make a hole in the lung.
It did. He's saying we just don't see it.
So it has to go through inspection now here, the lung, right?
He's saying no. It's more normal, right? So you now do inspection, or is it just a treifa? It sounds like he's saying it's just a treifa. He's saying you don't inspect it. Maybe you could do an inspection, and then if it would come out that there was no hole, maybe it's okay. But it doesn't sound. I mean, it sounds like me that they're saying it's a treifa.
Couldn't breathe in a needle, you swallowed it.
Right.
I know, but it goes into.
Let's cover a little more. Let's cover a little more. So now, what if now if it's if the needle is in the lungs, but here in this scenario, you only discover the needle after you cut open the lung. So I said Lakami de Ravami. They brought the cut open lung in front of Ravami. Savar Lakshuri. So he said it's kosher. Esper of Yirmiyah, Visem of Zika, Haria Shenikva O Shechasra. How can you tell me it's kosher? we know a lung that has a hole in it, or shechasra, or that has a lacking. We're gonna have to understand what the word lacking is. My chasra, what's the word chasra? We saw this yesterday. If you're gonna tell me it's a hole that originated from the outside and then pierced, through the inside, hainu nikva. That's the case of a hole in the lung. El lav mimifim. Rather, isn't it talking about where it did damage from the inside? Ushma minach chisaron mimifim shmei chisaron. And we want to say that we must learn that an internal hole is considered a hole. Different than we said yesterday, right? Yesterday we said, no, the whole reason it's talking about an internal hole is to exclude the opinion of Rav Shimon, who holds that an outside hole is only a problem if it goes all the way to the bronchial tube. However, if there's a hole from the outside and there's an internal damage, that would be a problem. So we're not saying that here. Now we're giving a different understanding of our Mishnah. Now we're saying that there's actually two types of holes. There's an external hole and an internal hole. So Hadr Shadrahu Lakamed Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. So they sent this lung. So basically, he wasn't sure how to rule on this needle in the lung case where it was split in front of him. So he sent this question to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Savar Lachshur. He also thought to permit it. Eisvei Rav Yirmiyah. So Rav Yirmiyah said the same challenge them. Our Mishnah is a challenge against it, right? A hole in the lung or an internal hole. My chasra, what's this chasra? If you're going to tell me it's an external hole, haino nikva. We already have that case of nikva. Rather, isn't it talking about an internal hole? In which case, there's needles inside. So obviously, there's an internal hole, internal damage. So we see from our Mishnah that an internal damage is considered a chesaron. So he wasn't sure how to answer either. So Hadar Shadru Lakaved Ravami. So he sent this question to Ravami, the treifa, and he said it's a treifa because maybe you say like our Mishnah. So Amrilay, so the student said back to Vaharab Rabbanan Machshirei, but the rabbis originally told us it's kosher, right? In the case of a needle found in a lung. So Amar Lahan, Hein Hachshiro Shiodu Me'eza Tam Hachshiro. These rabbis, they did it when they knew the reason it was kosher. We'll talk about what that means. Ana me'eza tam nechsher. Tilma ihava rea kaman minakva. Right? When did the rabbis earlier say the needle in the lung is kosher? That's when it was intact. So they were able to evaluate the lung and see there was no holes, like Baruch pointed out earlier. However, if you already cut open the lung and now you see the needle, you no longer have the ability to do due diligence and review whether there are holes here. But either way, we are seeing now at this point, we're understanding that this term chesaron, different than we said yesterday, in our Mishnah, there is an opinion that holds the chesaron refers to an internal hole. Different, right? Because yesterday we said it's not an issue if you have all these damage that you could pour out the lungs, because that itself is not an issue, all based on the fact that an internal hole is not considered a hole. But now we're saying something different. So, okay. Taima delesa. So the reason he said it's not kosher is because the lung was not intact in front of him. Ha'isa v'lo mikva kashera. But if it would have been in front of him, and we could see it wasn't punctured, it would be kosher. How's that possible? The Hamar of Nachman, Hai Simpuna Derea de Inkuv Trefa. He had the case where a bronchial tube had a hole. The regular bronchial tube had a hole in it, and he considered it a trefa. The bronchial tubes are on the inside; they don't go all the way through to the lung, right? They're like we discussed yesterday. And there's a picture on the bottom of the article. It's these little white tubes that come off the windpipe, and they're internal. So he said a hole in a bronchial tube is a trefa, and you said if I would have had the lung in front of me, it would have been kosher because I could see there's no holes outside. So we see an internal hole is a problem. So where was the bronchial tube with having a hole a problem? Where the bronchial tube was next to another bronchial tube, so it didn't have the ability to have any membrane come on top and heal the hole. Rav Nachman, Hai Hadure Dekanta De Inkve Lahade Chavre Magadala. How can you tell me that the case of a bronchial tube next to a bronchial tube does not make it kosher? We know there's the case of the large intestine where there's a hole in one of the coils, and then the other part of the intestine goes on top of it. That does make it kosher. So you're just told me, oh, it's not a problem on an internal damage to an internal bronchial tube because that was a specific case where it was next to another bronchial tube. and if it had been next to flesh itself, it would be fine. What do you mean? We know in the case of the large intestine, if one coil rests on top of another coil, even if there's a hole, that does actually make a kosher. Ravashi, trephos ka medamila hadadi. Are you comparing one type of trefa to another type of trefa? What do you mean? These are all specific, inyanim to himself, which we have, Sinai laws that you don't get to learn one from. Ein omrim b'trefa zu doma lezu. Sharei chotcha mikan umesa chot mikan v'chaya. You don't have the right to learn the specific physical realities of one treifa to another treifa. Why? How do we know that? Because we know there's an example of the leg of an animal, the hind leg of an animal. We know if it's cut at a very low point, potentially it could be a treifa. If it's cut at a high point, which is counterintuitive, it could live. So we don't learn, just because the physiology of one part of the animal, this is the rules of how it heals. It doesn't actually apply to other areas. One last line. If there was and then there was the case of a needle that was found in the big bronchial tube of the lung. So this is where the windpipe goes directly to the bronchial tubes, and then before it goes out to the small bronchial tubes, it goes directly into these two large bronchial tubes. So also the Kami Derabanan trophy. They brought this lung with a needle in the bronchial tube in front of the rabbis, and they called it a treifa. Lo amra bo lo isira v'lo heter.
They could not. They didn't. They could not make a decision.
Oh, they brought it in front of the same rabbis who initially would say, who had said a needle inside was a treifa, but here they could not make the ruling. They were unsure. Lo amra bo lo isira v'lo heter, because they didn't want to say it's isser and they didn't want to say it's permitted. Heter lo amra bo kishmaita. They didn't want to say it was permitted because of what we said earlier, that a needle found inside could still be considered a treifa. But they didn't want to say it was for sure usher because it was found in the bronchial tube. So because if it was found in the main bronchial tube, it's very hard to say it didn't come through the windpipe. So you can't say it pierced through the stomach. You can't say it. It pierced directly into the lung. Right. It came most likely through the windpipe if it was found in the main bronchial tube. So they weren't sure how to paskin on this case, even though normally they would hold a needle found inside could be treif.